We're at the crossover of baseball and football seasons, and we talk Royals and Chiefs today on Sports Beat KC, the sports podcast presented by the Kansas City Star. I'm your host, Blair Kerkhoff. Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy tells us why he thinks the Royals were quiet at the baseball trade deadline and what's in store for the Royals as they play out the string. Later, we'll hear from Chiefs cornerback Kendall Fuller on playing the slot corner almost exclusively this season. All of this on Sports Beat KC. The Major League Baseball trade deadline has come and gone, and when there's a trade deadline, there are winners and there are losers, at least portrayed by the media. And I've seen some of the winners listed as the Astros, and I get that because of the Zach Greinke acquisition, the Nationals, maybe the Braves, the Indians. Some of the losers, the Yankees didn't add to their rotation. The Red Sox didn't do much. A couple of others. Kansas City Star Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy is with us, and the Royals not listed among the winners or losers in any list that I saw, Lynn. But it's not like they were inactive throughout the last couple of months. They made some moves. They just didn't do anything near the deadline.
Yeah, they didn't see any sort of big name players either coming or going. I mean, for the Royals, that would be like a Whit Merrifield or a Danny Duffy or an Ian Kennedy, guys whose names people recognize, or veterans, established players, and whose names had been out there reportedly in different areas. You didn't see any of those guys move, so it sort of gets pushed aside. But for them, I think there's some small victories in terms of the guys they did move: Jake Diekman, Martin Maldonado, Homer Bailey. The fact that those guys were going to be potentially gone at the end of this season, and you got things back for them, and in most cases, things that that they direly need, like depth in the farm system and potentially a starting pitcher, a guy Mike Montgomery coming back to the organization. For the Royals, those are, I would at least say, small wins, and we'll see in the future how maybe they're bigger wins, depending on what those guys turn into.
The Diekman deal to the A's, they got back Blanco, the outfielder, and Ismael Aquino, a pitcher. I saw some mixed reviews on that the Royals might not have gotten enough. I don't know. Time will tell when it comes to that. I did like Diekman, and look, there's no reason to think that he might not be back with the Royals someday. That happened. Terrence Gore was rented out to the Cubs and it was back with the Royals. And now, of course, he's gone too. So you mentioned Martin Maldonado. I think it's interesting. He's on his second team since leaving the Royals.
And I had actually posted on the website, because they went back to Houston this season. He got traded from the Cubs. He got traded from the Royals to the Cubs and the Cubs to Houston. Houston seems like a place that he probably should have been to begin with. Going back to, the offseason, there was the report that he had a deal in place that he turned down. It would have been a 2-year deal. And then he was sitting there through the first, probably 3 weeks of spring training, just unsigned and, doing work in, I think, Puerto Rico, and just sort of trying to get ready for whatever was going to come. And when Salvi gets hurt, then it makes an opening for him. But until then, he was just sort of out there. When the team went back to Houston, I talked to him in the clubhouse one day, just sort of talking about his time there. And I talked to a pitcher in Houston just about the feel that they had for him. And it sounded like he liked the organization. He liked, he had been traded there midway through the previous season. He thought that it might be a long-term home for him, but it just didn't work out. And he wouldn't say specifically what he thought it was. Like he said, he sat down and talked to the GM and thought that it might be a fit. They were going to keep, communication open, and then he's sitting there through, the first couple of weeks of spring training. But like I said, he wouldn't go into detail. He said he thinks he sort of had a feel for why things didn't work out. But then you just sort of look and say, well, before the Royals signed him, he had to change an agent to get that thing actually across the finish line. So, you'd sort of put two and two together and figure that's why things didn't. He was a Boras client before and didn't get signed. It seemed like Houston was a fit. They liked him. He liked being there. And now he comes back around and ends up there for another playoff push. So it was just interesting to see how it played out, because having gone and talked to some of the people in Houston and talked to him about Houston, it seemed like that always should have been the fit. Of course, for Royals fans, it worked out well for them, because when Salvi went down, you had a guy to plug in.
Right, exactly. A Gold Glove catcher, right?
Yeah.
The only guy who didn't, besides Salvi, who had won a Gold Glove the last few years. Okay, let's talk about some specific players that are still with the Royals that were rumored to have been somewhere else. Let's start with Billy Hamilton. I thought of him as a speed guy off the bench for somebody. That somebody's going to be the Royals, right? Unless he's DFA'd, but he's going to be with the Royals now the rest of the way. Just nobody interested in Billy Hamilton?
That's what it seems like. It seems like, or at least maybe just not for, to give you anything back that was worth trading. Like if somebody felt that they wanted to take on, and he's making probably a little bit more money for that fourth outfield spot than or a speed guy off a bench than maybe somebody wanted to pay for. But yeah, people just, I think, looked at it and they may have speed guys in their organization. They may have guys that you don't have to worry about trying to find time for them, or not that he's a problem, but I think teams just didn't see the fit, or they felt like they could still have time, because you look at the Royals right now, and he really doesn't have a role other than a bench guy, because they've started to transition some more younger guys into the outfield, and they want to have them play every day. So Billy is just sort of, here for the time being. If they cut him loose, and I think that now it would have to be them cutting him loose, and then he could go into another organization and potentially get there before September 1st, and he'd be eligible to sort of help somebody in the postseason, or just for that push to get to the postseason. So that's still a possibility, but I also don't know, the thing that jumps into my mind immediately is everybody figures, okay, they didn't trade him, they're just going to cut him loose right away. I don't know if that's the case, just because there's no urgency to cut him loose. You say, well, you can bring up a young guy. The young guy's not going to play. right now, you have Gordo, you've got Bubba, who's going to play every day. They're starting to play Dozier now in the outfield some. They still, maintain that Soler is not a full-time DH. They want to get him out there. And if Mondesi comes back at some point, you got to start playing Whit more in the outfield. So whoever you bring up, Brett Phillips, Bonifacio, whoever you say, we get, you cut Billy loose and you bring up one of those guys, the guy's not going to play, or at least doesn't seem like immediately he's going to play. At least not. And the other thing is, you bring him up, he's not getting the everyday at bats he would get in Omaha. At least unless September becomes different, because then the season ends in the minors, and it makes more sense to have guys up here. But until then, there's no real urgency to do something with Billy from the Royals' perspective, and obviously there wasn't a deal to be made for him.
I think the Royals, by keeping Whit Merrifield, have made the comment how much they like him, how much they want him to be part of this organization. The Cubs were rumored to have had some interest in Whit Merrifield. I think it would have taken a heck of a lot for an exchange to have been made for Whit Merrifield. So don't you see him as a long-term Royal?
Yeah, I think the difference between, say, the deals they did make and a Whit Merrifield type deal is, for Whit, they would have wanted, you go back to, and it's not the same, it's not, it's apples and oranges, but, for a guy like Greinke, when they traded him, they got back guys that they knew were on the cusp of being major league players, that there wasn't a whole lot of doubt about them. These were low-level guys. You talk about Kane, Escobar, Odorizzi was in that one too. You knew what you were getting. For a guy like Whit, to deal him, they would have wanted, top, major league talent.
That type of return.
Exactly. And also, the Greinke, if I remember correctly, was an off-season deal as opposed to a deadline deal. And at that point in time, it's a little bit easier to facilitate taking away guys who are major league ready. At the deadline, teams aren't giving up big league talent, at least not a lot of big league talent, if you're trying to make a playoff push. So that's the difference. And I think with Whit, obviously they love Whit. They feel like his versatility, what he's done. He's become an all-star for the first time. He's not a guy that's just going to give away for the sake of giving away. The ask is going to be high, and probably should be.
I thought when the Royals went to Atlanta and won 2 games in maybe 2 of the best days that the Royals have had this season, that was almost like an audition for Royals players for the Braves, who are obviously in playoff contention here. Didn't turn out that way, but I wondered if there was maybe some thinking on the Braves when they were watching Ian Kennedy and Danny Duffy, who threw the ball really well, in one of those games in Atlanta that maybe one of those guys would have ended up in Atlanta. Didn't happen, but those were two names also that you kept hearing rumored around the trade deadline, Kennedy and Duffy.
Yeah, you saw the reports that some teams were interested in them. I think just for both those guys, I think the price tag is the biggest thing, is that they still have years left at making decent money, not off the charts money, but this is not bargain basement that you're talking about with Kennedy and Duffy. I think Kennedy, I don't have it in front of me, I think it's like $16 million that you're still talking about, for next year after paying whatever's left this year, and Duffy's still got 2 more years, talking about in that same neighborhood, $16 million a year. So. And it doesn't seem like there's really any appetite from the Royals to sort of pay down any of that money. The team taking them would have had to take that money. So I don't know that any team was really that interested, especially for a guy like Kennedy, who's now a closer. Teams have sort of shied away from paying that big money to closers in the last few years. So for him and Duffy to stay put, I think it was much about price tag, and again the fact that there's still years that they have left in the contracts.
I know it was different financially in 15 for the Royals, but they made deals that screamed we're going for it. I mean, to get Ben Zobrist to Kansas City, to get Johnny Cueto to Kansas City, they gave up a lot in the farm system for those two players, but they don't win the trophy without those two guys. And I thought, especially with Kennedy, that somebody would be willing, especially a larger market. We've said that the Red Sox, the Yankees are looking for starting pitching, not so much bullpen, but that somebody with deeper pockets might not have taken Kennedy. Kennedy's played pretty well. I mean, he's as a closer, he had a consecutive save streak going for a while. Maybe still does at this point, but his numbers have been pretty good here the last. After seems to be adjusted to the role of closer, he's been pretty solid in that role. So, but he's still a Royal and will continue to be a Royal. I know he loves being in Kansas City. He's expressed that with his family here and all. So. Nothing for the Royals at the trade deadline. They will continue on with a season that is going nowhere. But as you mentioned earlier, they are getting, they are getting a look at a couple of guys, and one of those guys is Bubba Starling. We haven't talked since Bubba Starling has arrived in Kansas City, made his major league debut, and the defense has been there. We always knew that would be. Dayton Moore and Royals officials have said, from the time they drafted him, he was major league ready defensively. It was always about, Bubba in the batter's box. And that part's been okay. A little bit ahead of where I thought it would be. What have you seen from Bubba Starling in the few weeks he's been with the parent club?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the biggest things for Bubba, again, defensively, he's been what you expected. I mean, he's had some great catches, some great throws. I mean, he's been a guy who looks like he can handle center field every day. Right now, that's not a problem. He's been healthy, this season, which has been the biggest thing for him since he's been drafted. But offensively, he's not looked overmatched. So when he originally came up, and he had decent numbers in AAA. When he first came up, I sent a message to a scout that I know who sees all the Royal system, and asked what he thought about Bubba. And the main thing he said is there's still upside there because he's been so injured that he still hasn't had all that much time playing pro
an incomplete
ball.
Career.
Yeah. So there's still upside, but he thought that he might have some trouble because of his approach being a little too passive, getting into some bad counts, and in the big leagues that's just going to put him in bad situations. And so that was sort of in my mind as soon as Bubba came up. And so as Bubba goes on a streak, he had reached base in 12 straight games, 11-game hit streak to start his career. The reaching base in 12 straight games tied Johnny Damon for the best start to a career in franchise history. But the thing I started noticing is at one point he had 15 hits, and 10 of them were in the first 3 pitches of the bat. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is the passive approach. And so I talked to Bubba, talked to the hitting coach, and that was one of the things that they saw right away was the idea that he was just going to take pitches early. That's not going to work. You get basically the same thing the scout had told me, that you're going to get in trouble against top pitchers doing this. And so they made that adjustment early, right out the gate. You got to swing. You got to be able to, I don't want to say just go up there swinging. That's not what he was doing. But
be ready to swing.
Yeah, be looking for something and be ready to swing early, because you get yourself behind in the count, and it's just going to be lights out for you. And so he did that during that streak. So that, as a matter of fact, the 15 hits were all during that 12-game streak, I believe. And like I said, I think there were 4 or 5 first pitch, and then there was 10 total that didn't get past the third pitch of the at bat. So he's being aggressive. He's not being passive. He's you saw 1 home run. It hasn't necessarily seen a whole lot of power, but that was another thing that I think people that's always the last thing to come that general managers and evaluators, scouts always tell you. So he's been solid. I mean, defensively, he's been everything you would have wanted. Offensively, I mean, he's still going to have to learn and grow. Any guy who comes up to the major leagues, at this point, with just, now he's, to remember, it's less than 20 games in, I want to say. There's going to be ups and downs. And, I mean, you talk to Ned and different people, and they're not really so much evaluating him as, what's he going to be. They're trying to let him play so they can, sort of grow and develop that way. But, yeah, I think he's started to develop sort of that routine, realizing what he's got to do at this level to be ready on a daily basis. So, yeah, I think it's probably a little bit more than what you would have expected offensively from Bubba to this point.
I know it's early in Bubba's major league career, but can you see him as the starting center fielder on opening day 2020?
I mean, I won't say that you can't. The only reason that I question it is I don't know what else they're going to do with the different guys. I mean, because you talk about whether it's other guys they want to bring up and take a look at, whether it's moving guys around. Now you've got Dozier playing in the outfield. I mean, you got Whit is a guy who seems like he's going to play more outfield than anywhere else now with Nicky and Mondi in the middle. You don't know what if Gordo comes back for another year. So I think that's the thing that gives me more hesitance than anything. But I think it's a possibility, yeah, that he's your guy next year, unless there's nobody knows when you get into the off season, the moves and the hot stove season heats up what might happen. But yeah, I think it's a possibility.
You mentioned it a moment ago. I think they want to see a little more pop in the bat, just a little more power. If you're gonna, Lorenzo Cain wasn't that kind of hitter, but he can occasionally get one out of the park for the Royals. And Bubba, he's still sitting at 1 home run, right? The one off a hand, and it was a great swing off of a very good pitcher in the 9th inning of a closed situation at Cleveland. But you just want to see a little bit more of that. And as you said, that's sort of the last thing that develops for a major league. Oftentimes, not Alfonso for the Mets or a couple others that are getting it done. So so you got a big road trip coming up. The Royals are off today on Thursday here, and they hit the road for was it 10 game?
10 games, 3 cities. Yeah. Yeah,
starting in Minneapolis, 2 Boston, 2 Detroit, and then back here. What's the objective for the Royals? They're obviously not playing for any kind of championship. They're not playing for wild card position. They're in that bottom half of baseball. They had climbed out of the second worst record in the American League, but they were ahead of only the Orioles in terms of winning percentage. They seem to have started to climb out of that after the All-Star break, played really well, and then have slipped back recently. This most recent series against the Blue Jays was, if a team that's as lost as the Royals can have a disappointing series, they just did, right, with the Blue Jays. So what's left for the Royals?
What's left, and I think it's probably starting to get a little bit familiar just because it was probably similar at the end of last season, but making decisions or getting more of evaluation on the young guys that you got. I mean, and some guys, and from a player's perspective, they're getting used to the major leagues and sort of starting to develop into the players that they're going to be. I mean, last year was crucial for a guy like Hunter Dozier. Like now we feel like, we probably have a sense of what he can be, what sort of a player he can be. But last year, I don't know that people really came away with that at the end of the season. I mean, like it was a decision whether or not, to move forward with him going into this season or, and they took Cuthbert off of the 40-man. I mean, I don't know that there was really a big difference on what you thought you might get from either one of those guys going into the offseason based off of the way last year ended. So now is the time to, get some of those guys playing time. And like Bubba, you got to play him every day now for him to get used to the big leagues, for you guys to get a sense of what he could be, to see if he starts to make some of those improvements. Nicky Lopez, the same thing. He's up here now playing every day. I remember talking to him back in, maybe it might have been, I was going to say last month, we're in August now, but it was weeks ago. I remember that, just talking about how the transition has gone for him, where, he started off a little kind of hot, and then he had a long drought, and he talked about just sort of getting used to the information and how to use it at the big league level, looking at, preparing every day. I mean, you guys talk about preparing. I'm like, well, what do you mean about that? He says, well, whether it's going over film, what your daily routine needs to be. Like, he didn't really worry so much about that stuff at AAA. Like, you just sort of go up to the ballpark, take it easy, get yourself ready for the game. But preparing for that day's pitcher, the guys you might see out of the bullpen, what to expect when you go to the plate, because you're not just going up there feeling like your talent's going to take over. I mean, you maybe can do that at AAA, but at the big leagues, you need that plus a game plan, plus some familiarity with who you're going to face. So that's all stuff that he was learning, and also just the off factor. I mean, like any ballpark he goes into that they haven't played at, he's going to Seattle, looking around, just being like, wow, he's still a young kid, I think he's turned just 24. So I mean, you got to sort of get some of that out of your system. So for some of these young guys, that is going to be part of the process at the end of the season. And I think for the Royals, it's also got to be again, evaluating what you got, seeing where, going into the offseason, what areas do we have to address that we can't address internally? Really, I think that, and then just getting experience, guys like, Keller, who you think what he could be, still got to get experience, make some evaluations on a guy like Sparkman in the rotation, Junis. I mean, there's still things of value for the Royals and for those players to accomplish these last couple of months. But it's not going to be a pennant race. It's not going to be a wild card race. It's going to be sort of the everyday grind of trying to get this club ready for a year down the line, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line.
Right, with hopes of meaningful September baseball in the future, more close future. We'll see if that happens. I think next year's a little too optimistic. We'll see a couple years down the road, maybe with the Royals. All right, Lynn Worthy, thanks for stopping by. When we come back, we will hear from Chiefs cornerback Kendall Fuller and what he thinks about playing the slot corner exclusively. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. The Chiefs had the day off on Thursday, but let's revisit an interview from Wednesday when the media talked to cornerback Kendall Fuller. Since practice started, we haven't seen Fuller line up at the outside corner in the base defense, only the slot or the nickel when the Chiefs were in the sub package. So we asked Steve Spagnuolo, the new defensive coordinator, about this, and he confirmed Fuller would be used almost exclusively in the slot. This makes sense for a few reasons. Teams are in sub packages the majority of time, about 80%. And in 2017, in his second year with Washington, Fuller was primarily the slot corner, and according to Pro Football Focus, he finished the season as the top-rated player when he lined up in the slot. There's a new defensive staff with new ideas, and as Fuller reminded us, Spagnuolo will be his fourth defensive coordinator in 4 NFL seasons. So let's hear what Fuller had to say about the slot corner position.
I just always just been controlling what I can control, just going out there. I think somebody had an interview just now. They told me slot is like 80, 90%. So, just going out there and just knowing the task at hand, playing inside, just the different type of guys you got to guard, the responsibility that you have in there. So just really just focusing on that and just locking in on it, and then just, like I said, just really just trying to learn the ins and outs of the defense. I think coming in, when I went to Virginia Tech, we had our DB coach. He just always preached us on learning how to be a DB, not just learning how to play one position. And I think that's one thing that, in this system, the nickel does. You have to do a lot of different things. They ask you to do a lot of different things. So, you're out there, some people say you're just playing one position, but the way you're playing it is almost as if you're playing corner, nickel, safety, and all that. So it's been fun. Well, I'm inside, outside. Mainly 90% of the time, I'm in the slot, even if I was going inside, outside. So for me, thinking of it, I guess people can make a big deal out of it, but I'm going to be in the slot. Just like last year, I was in the slot. So it's kind of the same thing for me.
I think the cornerback position will remain a work in progress for the Chiefs during training camp. Charvarius Ward and Bashard Breeland have been starters on the edge, with DeMontre Wade working in with the ones. Wade's been a camp surprise, and look for a story about him and the cornerback position soon by Brooke Pryor. With the move of Tremont Smith from corner to running back, don't be surprised if the Chiefs go shopping for a cornerback sometime during the preseason. Links to the stories we discussed can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Chiefs coverage is available on facebook.com/RedZoneExtra and the Red Zone Extra app. Royals coverage can be found on facebook.com/TrueBlue and the TrueBlue app. Thanks to producers Kathy Liu and Leah Becerra for putting together today's show. And Friday, Kansas beat writer Gary Bedore and I will remember beloved Kansas broadcaster Max Falkenstein, who passed away earlier this week. This has been Sports Beat KC, the Kansas City Stars sports podcast.